In this demo, what I want to do is show you again the basics of the MDM hub, but we're going to begin the process of creating various base objects. Before we do that, we got to log in, see if there's an ORS that has been created for our use, and then begin the analysis of where is the data, more or less what we're trying to do. So let me begin by logging in. Assuming that your administrator has configured the MDM hub correctly, all we got to do is log in. And in another demo, I show you how to bring up the MDM hub and services for our training classes. Here, it is already done. At least that's the assumption. And we're going to log in per your lab instructions, as the username is called training. That's the user. And the password is lowercase MDM. We log in. Now, which ORS are we going to be using for our labs? And also, which ORS am I going to be using for the demo? I'm going to use trn_lab, which is the same one that you will be using to build your model and do your exercises during the labs. Now, the first thing we got to do is understand what I'm looking at, and notice we have the workbenches. Most of the time as configurators, we're going to be using the tools under the model workbench. And I'm going to go to Schema Viewer and make sure that this ORS is empty, and it is. Let me get a right lock, because remember, if we do not get a right lock, we will not be able to edit. We'll be able to view, but not edit the ORS. And I'm acquiring a right lock so that I can be able to create objects. And again, I'm going to go to Schema, which is the area that we will be able to create our various base objects. Notice I click on landing, click on based objects, and there is nothing there that has been created. So this is a good ORS. It is empty. And remember, that's the definition of the MDM multi-domain. It is data model neutral. In other words, we don't force you to fit your business model to our data model. You create it from new, or you can import it. Here, we're going to build it from scratch so that we learn all the steps. So we confirmed that we are using the TRN Lab ORS. It is empty. Now, before we begin to build the objects that we need this, I want to show you a diagram that I will be using throughout the various demos. Now, this diagram is stored in my C drive, and you'll have this in your lab book as well as your presentations. It's called the data process flow. Let me edit this. And I always tell my colleagues and students and customers that I could probably teach the whole class just by following this diagram. Let's see what you think. When you see me finish the demos and you do your labs, let's see how accurate I was that I could teach the whole class with this diagram. It's a very powerful diagram. Now, the reason I have it in edit mode is because I do plan to modify this as I go along. Now, this is the data process flow. In other words, at the end of the day, when all is said and done, this is what the goal of what we want to do. We want to have produce the golden records. Whatever we do inside a hub, at the end, what we want is the best version of the truth, the golden record, i.e. the single customer view, or called the master record. So this is the goal. But we are very far from achieving that. Why? There's many things we got to initially start. Now, in this demo, I am not going to talk about each item, just those that I will be focusing on throughout some of the demos that are coming up that I will reference. Number one is a question. Where is the data? Where is the source data? So first thing, we got to identify where are my sources. Once we do that, and there's a lot of data analysis that happens before this, before we can create the hub objects. And if I were to draw a circle, I would say that this is the entire MDM multi-domain hub, okay? Including the golden records, because they're inside a hub, but we can send them out. So if that's the hub, question is, where's the source data? We need to identify that. What data is going to come in, and how. First stop we're going to make is the landing tables. The landing tables define the structure of the data from the sources that I plan to bring in. But I also have to do that sort of in parallel or in spiral development with the target data model. Some people say the target data model should be created first. Some people say the landing. I think technically the data model should be created first, but you'll see that for implementation purposes, we need to consider the landing and the target data model almost at the same spiral development level. And why is the target data model important? Because these green circles you see are the based objects. They are our entities in the data model, but they are also those very complex, sophisticated based objects. And of course, I'm going to be demoing these as I go along. And then the next stop is the staging tables. Staging tables take data from a landing table, process it. Notice there's something called cleansing. So they process, do various things like the mappings, and then when we execute them, it will move them into tables beginning in the based object, not directly in the based objects, but begin the process of moving data from a landing to a staging table. Now, those are the things I'm going to focus on without even going further, because there's so much to talk about. One thing to be aware is that I've mentioned one thing, data analysis, the source data. I do want to spend some time of what I mean by that so that in my demos, I can make sense out of it. In my demo, I'm going to focus on customers and customers that have addresses. So you'll see this, I have a sales source system, and I'm going to have a CRM source system. And I have customers, and customers have addresses, etc. So that's what I'm going to be demoing. Okay, so we'll spend some time there. The other thing I want to spend and focus your time here is that how do we bring data in? Well, we're going to answer those questions as we go throughout the demos. So for now, this is enough of the picture. I highly recommend that you keep this picture handy somewhere in your notes or when you're working on a project. So let me just minimize that. And where are my source data? I'm going to notice that I'm minimizing this, and I'm going to go back to the hub. And just to show you that, again, there's nothing there, first question is, where is the data? Well, let me create a couple source systems. I know from the requirements that my systems come from two source systems. And notice under the configuration workbench, there are some tools that might be useful for me. But for what I need right now, I'm pretty much going to focus on the model workbench. And here is systems and trust. Now, I am going to go ahead and create my source systems. Notice there's an admin source system already. That is system generated. It is a system source system, not mine. And it's there by creation of the ORS. My source systems will be sales. In other words, where am I getting data from? From a source system called sales. Then I'm going to add another source system, and I'm going to call that CRM. How do I know this? Because I've done some requirement analysis. How do you know this? Because in your lab, the course writer has given you enough instruction of what you need to consider, which sources, which targets, which source systems, etc. So mine will be called also a CRM. So I have data coming in from a sales system and a CRM system. That's enough to go on for right now. Now, where's the data for this? I'm going to minimize the hub. And the way my demos work, as well as your course, we're using the Oracle database, both as the keeper of our metadata. We can support DB2 and Oracle in terms of our ORS, our metadata, where we put our rules. But also we're using it because it also has our transactional data, our source system data. So ignore what you see here quite a bit. I'm going to go to the ORS TRN lab and ignore a lot of the tables. Right now, I just want to go and focus under the tables and tell you where the source data that I will be using is in. So notice it's in the TRN lab schema. And way at the bottom under ZZ, just by the course writer conventions, here is our source data, all the ZZs. My sales system data is coming from the ZZ underscore invoice summary table. Notice the columns and notice some of the data. Now, in real life, you would do quite a bit of data analysis, requirement analysis, understand the columns, the sizing, the anomalies, the profiling, etc. You could easily have used Informatica's data quality products to profile the data, check for anomalies, check the patterns, etc. We're not using that product, and the assumption is that somebody has done that analysis. I'm just pointing out that our sales system data is coming from something called ZZ underscore invoice underscore summary table. So we have these columns: customer name, customer ID, bill to, ship to address, and our data. I'm going to ask you to, throughout all my entire demos, focus on a customer called Barb Dwyer and all the various derivatives of Barb Dwyer. Barbara Dwyer, any typos, any misspell ways that someone could have entered Barb Dwyer. And I'll show you that. Here I see Barb Dwyer. Notice that you have her bill to and ship to address. Again, only because of time, I won't go into every record, but you should do this before you start your labs. Now, where's the CRM customer data coming from? Well, that consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tables. Customer, ZZ customer, notice the columns: full name, first name, middle, last name. Notice there's no, some columns are not in, some columns in the sales system are not in here. So pay attention to that. And the reason, again, I'm looking at the data is because I'm going to create based objects that have columns. I'm going to create landing objects that have columns. And of course, I want to move this data into there, into the hub. So there has to be some sense of congruency, hence my data analysis. What kind of data do I have here? Notice Barb Dwyer, and various permutations of Barb Dwyer. Look at the first name, middle, some data is null, last name generation, and etc. Notice there's a last update date, and there is a CRM ID. So the CRM data for customer, let's say Barb Dwyer, her information is in the table called ZZ customer. Where's her address? Well, let's go look at her address, but remember the CRM ID. We're going to need that. It's going to provide a link between address and customer to find her address. I go to the address table, I go to the columns, address ID, address line, go to the data. And again, only because of a demo, I cannot spend that much time, but you should study the data yourself as much as the requirement analysis team tells you to do so if you're the data quality person studying this. Constraints, columns, etc. So notice that I have an address ID and address, but how do I link this to the customer? Address ID. Is there a table that connects CRM ID and address ID? Yes, there is. There is a table here called customer address. So Barb Dwyer had a record called CRM ID in ZZ customer. There's a record that ends in 0831. It has a record ID of 14. So if I go to the ZZ table, I see that her address is 1810 Park Avenue in New Jersey, etc. Again, I repeat, I'm just picking on Barb Dwyer so we can concentrate on a customer as we progress throughout the demos. So Barb Dwyer is the lucky person. Now, that's where my transactional data is stored. It happens to be stored where I will be creating my metadata objects. In real life, don't do that. You want to have a separate ORS, separated. Notice I'm going back to the ORS. Here's the ORS that we're creating, which is what's going to contain our rules, our matching, our based object. It's our metadata for our project. The course writer has included the source data also in there, which is a no-no. But because this is an exercise, it's okay. In real life, your transactional source data will be coming in from disparate systems, not the ORS. So now that we have studied the data, where it is, and notice it's in Oracle. Now, what I would be here now is begin the process of going back to the hub and beginning to create the based objects. And this is where I'm going to stop. So in summary, I mentioned that we should do a thorough data analysis even before we touch the hub. Once we do data analysis, we will be able to go into the hub and begin the process of creating various based objects. The based object, the landing, that's when I use this image here. The landing objects, the based objects, and the staging. And we also created the two source systems that I'm going to need in here, the CRM and the sales. All right, so that is sort of the plan of where we're going. Now, we'll go on in separate demos and show you how do we build this. But remember barbed wire, and remember what we have. Various customers from the CRM system and various customers from the sales system, and some of them may be duplicates, some of them may have typos in them. In other words, uncleansed data. And now let me minimize this and just return to the hub, and thank you.